If you look back at just the historical evolution of how human beings exchange value, there's always been this built-in friction to buying something.
Oh, absolutely, like a physical friction.
Right. Going back to trading physical gold or even just handing over paper notes right up to the era of the ATM, you had to actually pull out crisp $20 bills, count them, and hand them over to another person.
You had to watch it leave your hand.
Exactly. You watched the capital literally leave your possession. It was this tangible, measurable loss.
Well, and that physical loss actually triggers a very real biological response.
Mm.
I mean, if you put someone in an fMRI machine and monitor their brain while they hand over cash, you literally see activation in the anterior insula.
Wait, the anterior insula, what does that do?
Yeah, it's the exact same region of the brain that processes physical pain and moral disgust, actually.
Wow. So spending money literally hurts.
It literally hurts. Behavioral economists call this the pain of paying. Your brain is basically sounding a tiny alarm, forcing you to hesitate and ask if parting with those resources is genuinely worth it for your survival.
That is so wild. So that biological friction was basically our natural defense mechanism against overspending.
Exactly. It kept us in check.
But, I mean, the entire history of consumer finance over the last 50 years has basically been this systematic campaign to anesthetize that exact pain.
Oh, 100%.
Like, credit cards smoothed it out by getting the item from actually paying the bill. And then Amazon brought in one-click shopping, which just made the transaction practically invisible.
Completely invisible.
But looking at the landscape today, we've crossed into this completely unprecedented frontier of consumerism. We aren't just removing the friction anymore, we are fracturing the purchase itself.
Yeah, we're taking that single moment of buying something and just shattering it into a bunch of tiny future obligations.
It's crazy. And welcome to this deep dive on the Generational Wealth Project. Our mission today is to unpack this brightly colored button that has essentially taken over the internet.
It really is everywhere.
It's integrated into every digital checkout cart on the planet. You know the one I'm talking about? The buy now, pay later button?
The famous 4 easy payments.
Right. And we need to figure out if this is actually a brilliantly efficient tool for managing your cash flow, or if it's, a modernized debt trap that just exploits our cognitive blind spots.
And if you want to protect your wallet in this era of frictionless spending, this is a conversation you absolutely need to hear.
Completely agree. And hey, before we start mapping out how these platforms actually work, take a second to hit that like and subscribe button for the Generational Wealth Project right here. That way you never miss one of our financial deep dives.
The urgency of this topic really can't be overstated, honestly.
No, it can't.
The whole landscape of consumer financing is going through a tectonic shift right now. And the implications for how you build everyday wealth, especially how consumers leverage their future income, are just profound.
Because we're moving away from financing long-term assets, right? Like houses and cars.
Right, we're moving from that to literally microfinancing our daily existence.
And to really grasp the sheer scale of that shift, we have to look at how inescapable this payment method has become. Buy now, pay later, or BNPL, as the fintech industry calls it, is no longer just a niche option.
It's not just for a new refrigerator or a $3,000 sofa anymore.
No, the parameters of what we consider financeable have totally collapsed. I was looking at the demographic data surrounding Coachella in 2025. This statistic is just wild to me.
Oh, the payment plan data. Yeah, that's staggering.
Right. More than half of all attendees used BNPL payment plans to secure their general admission tickets.
Half.
Over 50% of a crowd of 100,000 people financed a weekend music festival.
I mean, when you factor in the sheer volume of people there and the astronomical price of a Tier 1 music festival, the math starts to explain the behavior a bit.
Sure, because those tickets are hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars.
Exactly. And that's completely detached from the costs of travel and lodging. So from a pure cash flow perspective, using a short-term plan to lock in a massive luxury experience makes logical sense for a younger demographic.
Right, they're trying to preserve their liquidity.
Exactly. But the Coachella stat is just the macro level. The micro level is where the psychological shift becomes genuinely scary.
And that brings us directly to, Friday night takeout. We are now seeing delivery aggregators like DoorDash directly partnering with platforms like Klarna to offer installment plans for casual food delivery.
Klarna is an absolute behemoth in the BNPL space, by the way.
Huge. But think about what this means. We're no longer talking about financing a once-in-a-lifetime VIP festival pass. We are talking about financing a burrito.
Yeah, if you pull back and look at the psychological conditioning at play here, the implications are just staggering. What does it actually mean for consumer behavior when the barrier to entry for a massive festival and a casual Friday night pizza are identically structured?
The fundamental nature of the transaction is just flattened.
Because in both scenarios, the upfront cost is reduced to this trivial fraction. The actual price tag essentially becomes irrelevant to your brain.
You're completely untethering the consumption of the good from the payment of the good.
Exactly. Whether it's a $600 ticket or a $40 sushi order, your brain is being systematically trained to ignore the total cost.
It's only evaluating that immediate tiny micropayment needed to trigger the dopamine hit of buying it.
Right. The analytical part of your brain, the part that calculates total liability, is being deliberately short-circuited.
But wait, I have to ask, because dividing a payment into smaller chunks isn't exactly a new concept. I mean, infomercials have been doing the 4 easy payments of $19.99 routine for decades, right?
Oh yeah, to sell ceramic knives at 2 in the morning.
Exactly. And even before that, we had layaway. My mom used to use layaway. So what makes this specific digital version so much more dangerous than the old school ways of breaking up a purchase?
Well, the difference lies in the friction of the transaction and where the legal risk actually transfers. Let's look at old school layaway.
Okay,
Layaway was fundamentally an exercise in delayed gratification. It required immense patience.
right, like you wanted a winter coat, you put it on layaway at a department store in September.
And you physically drove to the store to make cash payments every 2 weeks. And you only took the coat home in December after the final cent was paid off.
The item was essentially held hostage until you proved you had the money.
Precisely. The risk was entirely on your patience, but no actual debt was ever created. You weren't borrowing money.
You were just saving up for a specific item in a highly structured way, and if you couldn't make the payments, you just never got the coat. The store put it back on the rack and refunded you.
Yeah, maybe they kept a $5 restocking fee, but that was it. But BNPL flips that entire dynamic completely on its head.
Because it's instant gratification.
It is instant gratification weaponized. You take possession of the coat today, you eat the takeout food tonight, the festival happens this weekend.
But you carry the financial burden of that consumption into your future.
You are legally binding your future income to pay for a memory.
You're paying for calories you've already burned, which honestly forces us to look under the hood at the actual mechanics of these transactions. How are these companies making this frictionless magic happen?
Because it's definitely not the clothing stores or the food apps acting as the bank.
Right, so who is?
The retailers are essentially just the storefronts. The real infrastructure is built and funded by massive fintech companies. When we define BNPL, we're talking about a highly specific class of short-term, unsecured consumer loans.
And what's the typical dollar amount for these?
Historically, they were designed to capture that mid-tier spending zone, so purchases ranging from roughly $50 up to $1,000.
Okay. And who are the big players we're talking about here?
The primary facilitators dominating this space are names you literally cannot escape at checkout nowadays. Affirm, Klarna, PayPal, and Cecil.
So they are the ones actually fronting the capital to the merchant instantly.
They are. They integrate their technology seamlessly into the retailer's digital checkout flow. From your perspective, it just looks like a simple payment option.
But on the back end, what's happening?
On the back end, an instantaneous loan underwriting process occurs in milliseconds.
Milliseconds, that's insane.
And the standard architecture for these loans is fairly uniform across all the major players. It's often called the pay-in-4 model.
Pay in 4. Okay, break that down for me.
The consumer has to make an initial down payment at the exact moment of purchase, and that is usually exactly 25% of the total price.
So just for a straightforward example, say I buy a $200 pair of running shoes. I pay $50 today at checkout.
Yes, you pay $50 today, the retailer ships you the shoes immediately because they've been paid in full by the BNPL provider.
Oh, so the store already has all their money.
Exactly. And you enter into a contract to pay the remaining $150 in 3 subsequent installments.
And how often are those installments?
Usually they're billed automatically every 2 weeks over a 6-week period.
Okay, and here is where I have to step in and play devil's advocate for the listener for a second.
Go for it.
Because the massive, bold print selling point of these platforms, the reason they went so viral, is that these loans are heavily marketed as being entirely interest-free.
That is absolutely their core value proposition, 0% annual percentage rate.
Right. So purely from a wealth management perspective, if I'm offered a 0% interest loan, That allows me to keep my own cash in a high-yield savings account, earning 4 or 5% for an extra 6 weeks.
Yes, the arbitrage.
Isn't this essentially free leverage? I mean, why wouldn't a financially disciplined person use BNPL for every single purchase instead of a traditional credit card?
Well, on paper, utilizing interest-free leverage to maintain your liquidity is actually a very sound corporate finance strategy.
Right. Free money.
And for a highly disciplined consumer, splitting payments up into 0% installments can mathematically be more efficient than using a credit card, especially if you're someone who carries a balance.
Oh, for sure. Because credit card interest is a compounding nightmare. It accrues immediately at rates north of 25% if you don't clear the statement.
It's an absolute wealth killer. So in theory, BNPL appears to be this safer, cheaper alternative.
But there's a catch.
A massive one. We have to look at the merchant side economics to understand the true nature of this ecosystem. Think about it. Why would a fintech company lend you money for free?
Yeah, how are they keeping the lights on?
And why would a merchant agree to this? Merchants actually pay a massive premium to the BNPL providers for the privilege of putting that button at checkout.
A premium? Like what kind of fee?
It's called a discount rate, and it's often between 4 and 8% of the total purchase price.
8%. That is significantly higher than the standard interchange fee for like a Visa or MasterCard. Those are usually what, 2 or 3%?
Exactly. So why would a merchant voluntarily surrender 8% of their top-line revenue when retail margins are already razor thin?
Yeah, that makes no sense. Why would they do that?
Because the data proves it is the most effective customer acquisition and basket size optimization tool ever invented.
Ah, basket size to get you to buy more stuff.
Merchants willingly pay that exorbitant fee because BNPL integration routinely increases average order values by 30 to 50%.
50% larger orders just from adding a button.
Yes, and it skyrockets cart conversion rates. That consumer who was going to abandon a $200 cart suddenly decides to check out.
Because they only have to pay $50 today.
Exactly. And then they often add another $50 in merchandise on top of it because their brain is only processing a 25% down payment on the new item.
Wow. So the merchant happily sacrifices 8% of the margin because they are generating massive volume they otherwise would have just lost.
Precisely. Yeah. So the free loan is actually subsidized by the merchant. And the merchant is banking on the fact that the platform will manipulate you into buying way more than you initially planned.
That is brilliant and terrifying. But the whole illusion of this interest-free leverage for the consumer relies entirely on perfect behavior, doesn't it?
It does. And these fintech platforms are acutely aware that perfect consumer behavior, especially over a sustained 6-week period across multiple simultaneous loans, is a complete statistical anomaly.
People are going to mess up.
Always.
Which brings us to the danger zone, the absolute most critical part of this deep dive. We need to explore what happens when that perfect behavioral streak breaks.
Because in the real world, it always breaks.
Autopay fails. Debit cards expire and get reissued. People miscalculate their checking account buffers. What actually happens when the perfect repayment schedule shatters?
The consumer falls off a sheer cliff. I mean, the transition from a benign 0% interest environment to a heavily penalized, high-interest debt trap is instantaneous.
Instantly. Walk us through the math on that penalty cliff.
When a payment is missed, the platform's terms of service basically allow them to completely alter the nature of the loan. Depending on the platform in your jurisdiction, failing to repay exactly on time can trigger penalty interest rates that skyrocket.
Skyrocket to what?
To a staggering 36.99%.
36.99%. Are you kidding me?
No.
That is borderline predatory lending territory. That completely dwarfs even the most punitive subprime credit cards on the market.
It is an astronomically high cost of capital. And that 36.99% is frequently coupled with flat late fees assessed for every single missed installment.
So they hit you with a fee and then crank the interest to 37%.
Exactly. The entire business model, their ability to offer 0% interest on the front end, only functions sustainably because their actuarial models predict that a specific percentage of users will inevitably stumble.
They need people to fail.
They capture that massive 36.99% yield on the back end alongside the merchant discount rates to subsidize their entire operation.
That is just brutal. But the damage isn't just localized to a late fee and some interest, is it? We have to factor in the systemic impact on the consumer's broader financial life.
Oh, the secondary fallout is often much more devastating than the immediate cash penalty. We really have to discuss the credit reporting mechanisms here.
Right, because people think this is off the radar.
A vast number of consumers operate under the false assumption that because BNPL is usually tied to a debit card, it just circumvents the credit bureaus entirely.
Which makes sense logically if it's coming out of my checking account.
But in reality, some of these lenders may perform hard credit checks when you apply for specific financing tiers through their service.
And if you've ever gone through the underwriting process for a home loan, you know the absolute dread of an unexpected hard pull on your credit report.
It dings your score immediately.
Just for asking the question.
It signals to the broader financial system that you are actively seeking new debt. But the real danger materializes when you miss a payment.
What do they do?
If you become delinquent on a BNPL installment, many of these providers will not hesitate to report that delinquency directly to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
Wow. And a single late payment on your credit report can devastate your score for up to 7 years.
7 years of damage over a missed installment. It severely impacts your risk profile. It alters your ability to secure favorable rates on a mortgage, finance a vehicle, or even pass a background check for an apartment lease.
So, just to put this in perspective for everyone listening, you could genuinely jeopardize your ability to buy a house in 5 years because you missed an $18 installment on a financed pair of sneakers today.
That is the harsh reality of intertwining these tiny microtransactions with macro credit reporting systems.
It's a huge mismatch of scale.
But there is another massive regulatory blind spot here that consumers rarely recognize until they are actively being burned.
What's that?
BNPL loans generally do not offer the robust consumer protections mandated for traditional credit cards.
Okay, I want to make sure the distinction here is crystal clear. If I buy a piece of electronics online with a standard credit card, and the merchant turns out to be fraudulent, or the item arrives shattered into pieces and the retailer refuses a refund, I have recourse.
Yes, you do.
I can initiate a chargeback. The credit card issuer steps in, reverses the charge, and essentially fights the merchant on my behalf. It feels like driving a car with a sophisticated airbag system.
That's a great analogy. You're referring to the protections enshrined in the Fair Credit Billing Act. Traditional credit cards are legally obligated to provide a robust layer of mediation and dispute resolution.
They basically hold the capital in escrow until the transaction is fairly resolved.
Exactly.
So if a traditional credit card is a car with airbags, is utilizing a BNPL platform like riding a motorcycle in heavy traffic.
The motorcycle analogy is perfectly accurate.
So if something goes sideways with the merchant, say that Coachella ticket turns out to be counterfeit, or the merchant just liquidates and ghosts you, are you completely exposed?
You have stripped away all the safety features for the sake of speed and convenience. With a BNPL transaction, there is a legal triangulation that consumers fundamentally misunderstand.
Explain the triangulation.
The BNPL platform has already paid the merchant in full, in cash, on your behalf the very second you click checkout.
Right.
Your contract, your legally binding loan agreement, is exclusively with the fintech provider for the repayment of that capital. It is entirely decoupled from your satisfaction with the underlying product.
Wait, so the merchant's failure to deliver the product doesn't void my loan?
In many cases, no. While the larger platforms have implemented some proprietary internal dispute resolution workflows, they are fundamentally not bound by the same strict legally mandated regulations as chartered banks issuing credit cards.
That is insane.
You can easily find yourself trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare where the merchant ignores your emails, the product never arrives, but you are still legally bound to authorize those biweekly withdrawals to the fintech company.
And if you stop paying them in protest?
If you stop paying them in protest, they will trigger the 36.9% penalty rate and report you to the credit bureaus.
You end up destroying your own credit profile over a merchant's failure.
Exactly.
Let's synthesize all of these mechanics and put them into a real-world scenario. What does this downward spiral actually look like for the average consumer utilizing this for just everyday expenses?
Okay, let's revisit the $40 takeout order.
The DoorDash burrito.
Right. You decide to use a BNPL integration through a food delivery app. You pay your initial $10, you eat the meal, the consumption is completely over.
Food is gone.
2 weeks later, the algorithm attempts to pull the second $10 installment. But perhaps you had an auto-renewal hit your checking account earlier that day, and your balance is just a little too low.
The ACH pull bounces. The streak of perfect behavior is broken.
Instantly. You are immediately hit with a flat late fee. Then, the punitive interest rate architecture kicks in, converting that 0% balance into a 36.99% compounding liability.
So now your $40 meal is effectively costing you $60, $70, maybe $80 by the time you clear the debt.
And if the delinquency extends past 30 days, the lender reports you to the bureaus. Your credit score plummets by 50 points.
Over a burrito.
A simple, miscalculated $10 payment doesn't just result in an annoying overdraft fee. It constitutes a measurable, long-term degradation of your foundational financial reputation, all while you simultaneously pay near 37% interest on a cold meal you metabolized a month ago.
A cold burrito financed at 37% while your credit score bleeds out. That is a terrifying synthesis.
It really is.
So we've established the theoretical trap hidden in the fine print. We know exactly where the cliff is and how steep the drop is. But the crucial question for anyone analyzing this macroeconomic trend is whether consumers are actually falling off this cliff or if the system is generally functioning as designed.
Let's look at the hard statistical reality.
What does the data actually say about BNPL regret?
The aggregate data paints a stark and deeply concerning picture of the American consumer's financial health. Current metrics indicate that nearly one-third of all American adults have utilized a buy now, pay later loan.
One-third of the adult population.
1 in 3.
That completely removes this from the realm of early adopter fintech novelty. We are talking about tens of millions of active users. This is standard, mainstream financial infrastructure now.
It is deeply embedded in the consumer economy. But the adoption rate isn't the shocking part. The staggering fallout is found in the failure metrics.
Lay it on me.
Half of those users report running into significant issues with their loans.
Wait, just to clarify the math on that, 50% of the people who use these platforms experience negative consequences.
Yes.
That translates to roughly 1/6 of the entire adult population of the country encountering measurable financial distress from a product marketed explicitly as a frictionless, stress-relieving convenience.
Half the users fail.
That failure rate is incomprehensible. I mean, if 50% of the people who bought a specific brand of microwave had it combust in their kitchen, the Consumer Product Safety Commission would recall it immediately.
Absolutely.
It would be investigated by Congress. But because it's a financial product wrapped in a sleek app interface, the fallout is just quietly categorized as user error or poor personal responsibility.
That is a profound comparison, honestly. The system privatizes the failure while socializing the normalization of the debt.
So what are these issues people are running into?
When researchers categorize these user issues, they consistently fall into 3 distinct buckets: systemic overspending, missed payment spirals, and acute purchase regret.
Okay, the overspending and the missed payments we just charted out with the 37% trap and the merchant discount rates. But I want to zero in on purchase regret.
It's a huge factor.
Because that isn't just a math problem, right? That is a psychological phenomenon. What is the mechanism driving such widespread buyer's remorse?
This requires a deep dive into behavioral economics, specifically the concept of hyperbolic discounting and time inconsistency.
Hyperbolic discounting. Okay, explain that.
By completely neutralizing the immediate pain of paying that we discussed at the start of the show, BNPL actively circumvents our innate budgeting instincts.
Right, the interior insula doesn't light up.
Exactly. When a consumer looks at a high-ticket item and the interface only demands a trivial fraction of the cost to take possession, the brain's analytical risk assessment center is bypassed.
The internal voice that says, hey, we can't afford this right now, is just drowned out.
Drowned out by the immediate dopamine release of acquisition.
So the checkout flow is literally engineered to hack our impulse control. It's not that consumers are inherently weaker today. It's that they are up against algorithms optimized by neuroscientists to make them click buy.
Exactly. It is asymmetrical warfare. The data overwhelmingly proves that BNPL is extraordinarily effective at dissolving rational restraints.
People buy stuff they wouldn't normally buy.
Consumers routinely acquire goods they would have unequivocally walked away from if presented with the aggregate cost up front. But the neurological high of the new purchase is fleeting.
Dopamine wears off fast.
Once that dopamine spike metabolizes, the reality of the Guy weekly installment sets in. That is the architecture of purchase regret. You are paying for past impulsivity with present-day liquidity, perpetually.
Wow.
You are forcing your future self to subsidize the momentary cravings of your past self.
It's the financial equivalent of a severe hangover. You wake up locked into a 6-week commitment for a fleeting high.
Precisely. And it creates a cascading effect on your baseline psychology because your future income is consistently spoken for before it even hits your checking account.
Given the sheer scale of everything we've just unpacked, the ubiquitous integration into every app, the penalty cliff, the lack of credit protections, and this massive 50% failure rate, We have an obligation to provide the listener with a concrete strategic defensive playbook.
We definitely do.
These buttons are not retreating. They are going to become more deeply embedded in our digital infrastructure. So how do we operate within a system optimized against us? Let's map out the defense.
The absolute first line of defense is a rigid internal diagnostic question before every single transaction.
Okay, what's the question?
Can you simply make the purchase outright in cash today?
Just buy it.
If you have the liquidity and deploying that capital does not dangerously deplete your emergency reserves, pay in full. Do not introduce unnecessary complexity, counterparty risk, and structural liability into your personal cash flow for the mere illusion of convenience.
Keep the architecture of your finances simple. Just buy the item.
It is the most effective way to retain control. Second, if you do determine that financing is necessary, you must subject the terms and conditions to meticulous scrutiny.
Read the fine print.
You have hunt for the hidden tripwires. What is the exact dollar amount of the late fee? What is the penalty APR when you miss a payment? Does their underwriting process involve a hard credit pull?
Because it's a real loan.
You must evaluate this transaction with the exact same gravity and skepticism you would apply to financing an automobile, because legally and mechanically, it is a binding loan.
And the third strategic layer is weighing the arbitrage against traditional credit cards. If you have an established credit card and you have the discipline to pay your statement balance in full every single month without fail, use the credit card.
Without question.
You gain the robust consumer protections, you get the dispute resolution airbags, you earn the rewards points, and if you clear the balance, your effective interest rate is still zero.
A disciplined consumer utilizing a traditional credit card is mathematically superior to BNPL in almost every single scenario.
But we have to acknowledge reality here. Millions of people will continue to use BNPL either out of necessity or habit.
They will. And if you must operate within this ecosystem, there are two non-negotiable golden rules you must adopt to survive. The first is purely operational.
What is it?
You must mandate automatic payments.
I cannot emphasize this enough to you listening right now. Autopay is not a convenience feature. It is an absolute safety net.
It is your lifeline.
Do not arrogantly assume your memory will prompt you to log into a specific app in exactly 14 days to manually authorize a $12 transfer.
Human memory fails.
You will get distracted, you will miss the notification, and that is exactly the behavioral lapse their financial models rely on to trigger the 37% trap. Set up autopay the exact millisecond you finalize the purchase, and rigorously maintain a cash buffer in the underlying checking account to absorb the draw.
The buffer is critical to prevent cascading overdraft fees on the bank side. But the second golden rule is arguably the most vital behavioral shift we can discuss today.
I think this is the most important takeaway of the whole deep dive.
You must establish an impenetrable boundary. Absolutely avoid the temptation of utilizing BNPL for routine, consumable, or recurring purchases.
This goes directly back to the DoorDash burrito and the grocery deliveries. Why is this specific boundary the hill to die on?
Because it represents the mathematical threshold between an isolated liquidity event and a structural solvency crisis. Let's look at the difference.
Okay.
Financing a one-off, highly unexpected $500 emergency, say, replacing a blown tire so you can physically commute to your job, is a defensive maneuver.
Right. It keeps you employed.
Amortizing that fixed cost over 4 weeks might genuinely prevent a total cash flow collapse. It bridges a temporary gap. But financing your daily sustenance,
Financing Friday night pizza.
financing pizza, weekly groceries, household consumables, that is a mathematical guarantee of a perpetual debt cycle.
Because the need for calories and toothpaste never ceases, it's a recurring liability.
Exactly. If you are financing this week's caloric intake over the next 6 weeks, what happens next Thursday when the fridge is empty again?
You finance that week's food as well?
And the week after that? Suddenly, your current present-day income is entirely consumed by servicing the debt on the calories you burned a month ago.
You are perpetually playing catch-up just to maintain baseline survival today.
It severely obscures your true cost of living, creating a synthetic inflation effect on your personal budget. It traps you in a recursive loop where your future labor is completely mortgaged before you even clock in to earn it.
It transforms a simple cash flow tool into a lifestyle anchor.
Exactly.
Let's pull all of these threads together to summarize the reality of this ecosystem. Now, pay later is not inherently malevolent, right? It's simply a highly evolved financial mechanism.
Yes, it's a tool.
It can be an affordable, convenient option for managing cash flow if and only if it is evaluated with intense skepticism, compared rationally against your other credit options, and repaid with absolute robotic perfection.
Perfect behavior.
But the margin for error is razor thin, and it carries remarkably steep asymmetric risks to both your credit profile and your net worth if mismanaged.
It is a razor-sharp tool. And like any sharp instrument, it can help you build leverage or it can inflict devastating injury if you fail to respect the blade.
Well said.
But as we wrap up this analysis, I want to introduce a broader, more philosophical consequence for the listener to consider.
Let's hear it.
We've spent this time dissecting the mechanics, the APRs, and the individual behavioral risks. But look at the macroeconomic shift occurring. If we are systematically conditioning an entire generation of consumers to microfinance their fast food, their groceries, and their casual weekend entertainment, what happens when this fractional payment mindset permanently alters our relationship with daily existence?
Oh, wow. Where does the fracturing actually stop?
Exactly. Are we accidentally marching toward a reality where we no longer possess the present moment?
Because everything is financed.
If every meal and every minor experience is instantly converted into a 6-week liability, are we essentially conditioning ourselves to subscribe to our own basic daily existence on credit?
That is a genuinely chilling perspective. We are shattering the transaction to the point where we are merely renting our daily lives from a syndicate of fintech algorithms.
Renting our own lives.
The next time you are staring at a digital checkout, and that brightly colored button offers to magically split your lunch into 4 easy payments, take a second to remember the biological pain of paying.
Let it hurt a little.
Sometimes leaning into that little bit of friction is the only mechanism protecting your future wealth. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. One final reminder to hit that like and subscribe button for the Generational Wealth Project so you don't miss our future insights, and we will see you next time.